there's just so much going on, right? I see responsible AI being a huge area of focus, not just for Microsoft, but for everybody in the field, right? Because, it's a hard problem, and it's often not 100% obvious what's right. Like a lot of times, you have entire teams, entire companies putting out models that then do horrendous things that people just didn't catch it, or people didn't think it was wrong, but then other people think is wrong. So just having a really formal way to think about it. I feel like we're in the early days of that, and Microsoft has been doing it, other companies have been doing it, and I feel like we're just taking baby steps. There's just so much more that we can be doing and that we will be doing to fix the issues. I also think that we're still in the age of large models, right? We've started seeing that a few years ago of models getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It still seems like every week I read tech news and there's something that just blows my mind. Just somebody did an even larger model than the previous one that does this and that and that. So I still feel like we're living through history in a way in AI, right? I feel like there's other areas of computer science that happen, that you're living through history if you lived 20, 30 years ago. And I certainly feel like we're living through history now in AI, just these humongous models that come out that do just these amazing things. And I also think that we're going to start seeing a bigger focus on data. I feel like we've put a lot of focus into improving our models and kind of making better models, but we've kind of forgotten the data bit. And I feel like we're getting back to that a little bit. I feel like there will be better integration between MLOps tools and data processing tools. And I think there will be a better, a stronger focus on kind of having good data, not just having good models.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the D4 Data Channel podcast. I'm your host Deepak, and with me we have Ms. Bea Stollnitz. Bea works as a principal developer advocate for Microsoft and specializes in Azure technologies, particularly in Azure ML. Bea is a familiar face to Azure users. She appears and showcases all the cool features at Microsoft conferences and in various Azure ML communities. She also has a technical blog about various ML frameworks, techniques, and other components of Azure ML. It's a pleasure to have you here today, Bea, and thank you for accepting my invitation.
Thank you so much, Deepak. I'm very excited to be here. So thank you for inviting me.
Great, thanks a lot. So, so maybe if you could give a quick introduction about yourself regarding your role and your aspirations in this particular field.
Sure. I mean, you pretty much said it, right? So I'm a principal developer advocate at Microsoft. And so my role is basically kind of half as a developer and half as somebody that helps other people develop with Azure ML. So half of my time I spend coding and working very closely with the team and kind of thinking through features and that kind of stuff. And then the other half of my time I spend either doing presentations or videos or demos or blog posts or engaging with the community to make sure that people know how to use our features and that they're kind of informed of best practices and things like that.
Right. Great. So I'm also an Azure user and I use Azure ML a lot. So yeah.
Okay, so I didn't know that. That is super exciting to hear that. That's awesome.
So and I'm currently working with the responsible AI team with Microsoft. I'm closely working with that team, and we are doing a pilot together with my company and that company which I'm working and with Microsoft. So
that's one of my favorite features. So yeah, that's pretty cool, and it's a really good team. So you're in good hands. Yeah.
Great.
Very cool.
So yeah, I have a few questions for today, and starting with this one. So out of the AI offerings from Microsoft, where exactly does Azure ML feature?
So basically we're a tool for ML engineers and data scientists to train and deploy their models in the cloud, just to put it very simply. And so and also Azure ML has 3 different ways that people can interact with it. So we have an SDK, so you can write code to train your model in the cloud and to deploy your model. We have a CLI, so you can write YAML configuration files and then use a command line interface to execute them. And we have our studio, which is like a portal, like a kind of essentially a web page that you can go to where you can interact with it. So we try to offer like all features, hopefully, that's our goal, to offer all features equally in these 3 different ways so that people can train their models and deploy their models in the cloud.
Right, right, perfect. So, so my next question, like, so what is the design principle behind Azure ML in the MLOps space?
So it's basically to enable people to bring their models to production, right? So I know if you've done, we've all done, like, or many of us have done either grad school or like studying on our own, right? And we spend so much time, at least, okay, I'm going to speak for myself. In grad school, I spent so much time, sometimes even days, training a model on my machine, and my machine would be tied up, right? And if you're at grad school and all you have is a laptop, that's what you can do, right? But when you're starting to like migrate your code into production and kind of doing some real work that's going to be used by users, you need to train in the cloud so you can continue developing. Also, you'll have access to GPUs and much more powerful machines, and even distributed computing and all that. So that's basically the idea. So if you want to scale your training and then deploy your model so that people can just query an endpoint and kind of have access to your model, then that's kind of where Azure ML sits, right? To kind of bring your work to the next level and kind of get people, get it to scale, get people to use it.
Right, right. Yeah, so one of the important feature which I like in Azure ML is the model versioning. And so
Uh-huh.
that's something, yeah, so that's something which I really like, because back in our days, like when we started, like we don't have the version controlling, and like we just what to say, represent those models by numbers, like model 01, model 02, and that becomes
Yep.
much pain, like to backtrack which data set we trained for this particular model. And yeah, like
You're
that's so
totally right.
when I
Yeah.
actually, yeah, when I moved on to this Azure ML, that's one thing which I really like at the start. Like, okay, like I can connect the data set along with the model, and I can access at any point like which version I'm actually doing it. So yeah, pretty cool.
Totally. Yeah, and it's the kind of thing that, like, I think people that come new into the field now, they just take it for granted because, of course, you're forever. How can you live without model versioning, right? But if you've been in the field a little longer and you've had to do kind of things on your own machine and kind of before these tools were available, then you really appreciate those simple things, right? Because you've had to live without them. Yeah.
Right, right. And even the model transferring, so like it was a pain back in the days when like we had to train it in our local machine, then we had to export the model to somewhere. But now it's like we have the Azure CLIs wherein like, okay, we have the model trained. Let's say I want to
Yep.
deploy it in a, what to say, like I want to make it as an endpoint directly. Okay, jump into that particular endpoint. Or like if I want to move
Exactly.
into a blob storage, I can just do it with just like one cell command. Like it's done. So
Totally.
yeah,
Yep.
I see the importance there, like, or else it was a pain, like, okay, we have to physically transfer the model that into some other storage, and like, yeah, it was pain.
Exactly. Totally. Yeah.
So so it seems like there have been like many new AI services and the products that are created for non machine learning experts. So should the AI practitioners be concerned with it?
I don't think so. I'm not concerned. So Microsoft does have a lot of offers that are for non AI developers, right? So we have Azure ML. I like to think of it as like a cake with 4 layers, and Azure ML is like at the very bottom of that layer of the cake, right? It's like the bottom layer, and Azure ML is for machine learning engineers and for data scientists who are developing models from scratch and kind of who understand AI, right? And then we have 2 other layers on top of that for developers, our cognitive services layer and our applied AI layers, which have like, they offer prepackaged solutions like for common problems. For example, vision. If you need to train a model that distinguishes cats from dogs, you don't have to write it from scratch these days. You just go to the cognitive service, to the vision cognitive service, you give it some images of cats and dogs, and it will do it for you. Or another Azure AI example would be like the form recognizer. If you need to recognize a form, back in the days, you had to actually train a model from scratch and kind of give it a bunch of forms and get it to understand what's a checkbox and what's a free form kind of field and whatever. These days, you just use the form recognize and it does that for you. And so these are like two layers that you can use as a developer without being an AI practitioner. That you can just be a regular developer without AI knowledge. And then we have another layer on top, like the top layer of the four, which is for business users. For example, people who don't know how to program but who still want the advantages of AI, and we have power apps for that. So people can just, through power apps, they can do some pretty powerful things with AI without actually writing code. And so with that, if you think about it, we have one layer for machine learning engineers, two layers for developers, and one layer for business users, for just the general population. So yeah, if you look at that, you might think, like, are we going to be out of a job? Are we like putting all this work into making all these services for people who are not developers? And when I'm giving the example of Microsoft, but you can look at any other company, and everyone is doing the same. Like, how can we make AI more accessible to people who aren't AI practitioners? And I don't think that's a bad thing personally. I feel like we're not replacing this core of people like me and you who actually know machine learning. I feel like we're expanding the field, right? I think at the core of AI, there's still people writing Stable Diffusion from scratch or writing ChatGPT from scratch. But what we have today that we didn't have 5 years ago is like a whole community of people around that are using these tools and bringing a lot of creativity to these tools and doing amazing things with these tools without necessarily having to be AI experts. And in my opinion, that just kind of expands the field. It doesn't necessarily replace the engineers and scientists that are creating new AI. So I'm actually really excited about it.
Great. So yeah, so like when I started with Azure Tech Stack, like the first service which I utilized was Azure Handwritten Recognition, OCR,
Oh,
OCR
really?
service. So
Yeah.
yeah, so there was a trouble actually. Like so, like when we were considering the open source, it was mainly Tesseract and some open source platforms were there. But like
Yeah.
to kind of what to say, get into more what to say handwritten forms and other stuff, like we had to use this, we had to convert them into image and like a lot of pain. Okay, and what happened is like to train a custom model, it will take maybe a good amount of time at that time. Like not now, maybe now it will be much faster, but like maybe like 5 years back or 6 years back,
Right.
it was actually like a little difficult. Like yeah, like and yeah, like maybe so what really happened is like, okay, when Azure OCR is coming into picture, maybe I don't know, like I think I used it maybe 4 years back or something. So at that
Right.
time, what happened is like it gives a credibility and even a what to say, we have a confidence. So when
Right.
Azure OCR is giving me the efficiency, like it's easy for me to what to say, validate with the customer, saying,
Right.
okay, like this is the service from Microsoft and this is what we are getting as an efficiency. So we cannot
Right.
expect beyond that. So there is kind of
Exactly.
like a cut. So
Yeah.
that is kind of like the flexibility we started getting when we started using the Azure Cognitive Services instead of like the
Mm-hmm.
custom train model in those kind of cases, because it's very hard to train a custom OCR at that time, like because like
Right.
we have to train it with lot of, maybe like now it may be very easy, but like maybe at that time it was very tough.
Exactly. And as a scientist, you want to be spending your time in the things that haven't been done, the things that actually are
Correct.
innovative for your field, right? You don't want to be reinventing the wheel, right? And so if those things can be
Correct.
provided, just use them, right? Don't reinvent the wheel. And actually, a new cognitive
True.
service that we have is the OpenAI service, which is really cool, where you can access a lot of the OpenAI models just from within Azure ML, just very easily, which is very cool.
Right. I see the integrations actually even with the Hugging Face, and we can directly load the models into an endpoint from the Azure endpoint. Like we can directly pull the Hugging Face as well as the, like I think the OpenAI services. I didn't try it actually in inside Azure, but like I could see like their services is also available. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
it's, it's
very
pretty
cool.
amazing actually
Yeah.
the way it integrates.
Yeah.
So, how to the next question? Like, so it's regarding the responsible AI. So, like, creating responsible AI has been a major concern in the industry. Like, and is Azure ML doing anything to like mainly mitigate this kind of issues, basically?
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned it, right? You're working with it. So we have a new
Correct.
feature, which
Correct.
is the responsible AI dashboard, which became, so we have like two levels of like release. We have public preview where we allow people to play with the feature, but we're not making any guarantees. We can change it still. And then we have general availability. At that point, we're like, yeah, the feature is stable. You can use it, right? And so responsible AI dashboard became GA or general availability in our last conference, which was Ignite. Just a couple months ago, and so this is pretty big deal, right? Like to have this offering that can help people um, make better decisions with our models. And so the way you use responsible AI dashboard, it's actually pretty simple. Like so, we ship a bunch of different components that you can use when training your model. So components are like things that you can add and as a part of a pipeline, as a training pipeline. So if you're using the UI, you can literally just drag and drop these components into your training. And so we ship a bunch of components that help you analyze and discover issues with your data and your model. And so by using those, you get a report, which is our responsible AI dashboard, right? You get a report that tells you things that, or alerts you of things that may not be ideal with your model. So for example, let's say if you have a model that is giving loans to people, it will alert you if you have a certain ethnic group that is being consistently denied loans. That's one example. Or for example, if your data doesn't have enough representation of another ethnic group, in which case you just need to add more data, right? So it alerts you of those things. So what it's not, I talk to a lot of people about it, and they're like, ooh, there's like a responsible AI feature. Great. So can I just like click a button and it's like responsible? Well, it's not magic. We don't do magic here, right? So it's more like a tool to help you look at your model, look at your code, analyze it, and then make certain decisions to make it better and make it more responsible, right? It's not a tool that you just click a button and poof, all your problems just go away and you can just like be happy about it. So you still need to be involved, but it's something that we didn't have, and it's a huge help these days to kind of look at that dashboard and think about it and kind of think about things that you probably wouldn't think about if you don't use it, right? So I do think that we're taking steps in the right direction.
Right, right. So I've been a part of their pilot test actually, and on the general availability tool. And currently, what we are building is mainly on the NLP side. So
Yeah.
yeah, so on the NLP side, like the features were like it is little different actually. Like we cannot really use the feature dependence charts, which is actually there in the general models basically. So mainly on the panel data. So yeah, like we are trying to actually figure it out because we are trying to load the transformer models into the
I see.
responsible AI dashboard, and yeah, like we are actually close by. Like we got the first glance, but like yeah, it is kind of still evolving. And our plan is like in my company, like what we are trying to do is like we have a product on ESG due diligence, wherein like we like our product is actually accessing the ESG ratings for different companies, and we have a model like which clearly categorize what is a risk element in news items and so on. So we are trying to see like where this model is kind of like how we can upgrade this model using the responsible AI dashboard, like whether how
Right.
the model predictions can be made better, and is it giving a fair prediction, so and so like
Is it
we are
helping you?
actually.
Do you feel like
So
you're
yeah, so
discovering
we
things
have
about your
started in.
model? Yeah.
Yeah, so we have started integrating it actually. Like the first version is up, and we
Okay.
got the testing data for it. So one of the challenge right now is like in the responsible AI dashboard, the textual analysis feature is something which is currently developing, and yeah, we are
Okay.
doing that proof of concept now. So
I
yeah,
see.
I hope
So
like
you get to,
maybe like
yeah.
yeah, we will get the flavor actually like soon.
Right.
So yeah, that's where we are at that moment.
That's pretty cool. That's exciting.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So yeah, so over to the next point. Like, what are some of the other new features that have been recently added to the Azure ML?
Sure. So we talked about the responsible AI, which is GA, right? We have two other features that we announced as GA, or two other major features that we announced as GA in our last conference. So we have a new version, a V2 version of our SDK. And this may not sound like a big deal, but it is a big deal because our second version of the SDK has a really close parallel to our CLI. And so with this new version, you can go back and forth between using the SDK and the CLI very easily, because if you use one, you can easily migrate to the other. And it also makes it very easy to mix the two in the same project, because sometimes it's easier to create a certain Azure ML resource using code. Other times it's easier to create the resource using the CLI. And so it's just very cool to just be able to mix the two in the same project. And so that I personally love the SDK v2, and I think it's a huge step forward. We also announced general availability of our Auto ML feature, which, I think you probably understand what AutoML is. Like, it tries a bunch of different algorithms and a bunch of different parameters for those algorithms automatically for your data, and then it picks the best algorithm and the best parameters. And a lot of people, may think, oh, but I'm a data scientist, I know how to do that. Why would I do that? That's like for people who don't know what they're doing. But it's actually not. And the reason why it's not is because it gives you the code that it generates. Like when it finds the best model and the best parameters, it gives you that code. So yeah, if you don't have experience doing that, you can just take it and just use it. But if you are an expert, you can just take that code and tweak it and experiment with it and just kind of use it as a starting point for your experimentation. And that does save a lot of time, even if you want to have that fine control over all the choices, all the parameter choices and everything. So it is really cool. And the coolest thing is that we now support both vision and NLP, which is also new. And so it, for you're doing NLP, so it's actually a cool thing for you to look into if you haven't already.
Right.
And so we also announced 3 other features, major features in public preview. So one of them is registries. So registries are basically organization-wide repositories for Azure ML resources. And so what they do is they make it a lot easier for people to share resources across teams or across organizations. That's still in public preview, so I probably wouldn't recommend using it in production, but I think it's a good thing to start using and start playing with. And I've personally played quite a bit with it, and I actually think the feature is quite solid, even though it's still in public preview. So it's a pretty cool feature. Also, we have Spark integration within Azure ML. So if you're doing huge processing, data processing, you can access Spark Compute without having to leave Azure ML, which just makes it just so much more efficient. And we also released this feature called the ACPT, or Azure Container for PyTorch, which is basically a new environment, a new curated environment that is just loaded with goodies, with like packages that speed up training of PyTorch models, such as Onyx or DeepSpeed and many others. And it just makes it so much faster. If you're working with large PyTorch models, this is just like amazing. It just cuts the time of training and deployment by so much, especially if you're using like Hugging Face type models and that kind of stuff. And so that's also in public preview. And also, if you want to learn more about most of these features, check out my blog. And this is my shameless plug for the day. I talk in detail about many of these features.
Right. I read your blog actually, and I went through some of the tutorials actually. Like, it's pretty interesting. And
Awesome.
regarding, I think I checked I tested the AutoML functionality. Like, I like AutoML as a validation service. So it's always nice to validate, like, okay, whether we are build is the best model, or is there any better way or better what to say architecture that can get the more predictions actually. So I consider AutoML in that way. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, totally.
And
I agree. And
yeah,
I really do believe it's also for experts, like, because a lot of people that kind of dismiss it as like, I know what I'm doing. But I feel like it's for everybody.
right. Earlier, I used to hear like AutoML was giving. So, for example, let's say we are training a NLP model, and like earlier, like I don't know when the uh, deep learning models came into picture, but like earlier it was only machine learning models.
Machine learning.
It was getting trained, like, yeah. But now we have the deep learning models also. So
Yeah, so
that
that
is
was in
the
our
catch.
last conference. So at Ignite a couple months ago, that we announced NLP and vision models, so deep learning models, basically. Yep. So
Right,
that's new.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, like, and one of the best part is like with AutoML is that we have the direct connection actually. Like, okay, we
Right.
have the model in AutoML, and from there directly. So let's say if we build a custom model, then we have to save it in the registry, then we have to take it from there, then we have to create the jobs for it. But if it's an
Right.
AutoML, it is much more flexible actually. So, but yeah, like we have figured it out. So it's not a problem. Like we have figured the pipeline for that. So
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah,
Awesome.
I'm very proud. Like we use Azure ML a lot, and we we use yeah we use pretty much all the Azure components. Like our entire product is built on
Okay.
Azure, and
Wow. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and
I'm
Azure ML
glad
is
to
a
hear
major
that.
part. Like yeah, till
Yeah.
now our architecture is mainly like yeah. So there is one thing one thing I want to highlight. So I don't know
Okay.
whether it is a good approach or not. Like what we do is we have the model which we train on the Azure ML notebooks. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and earlier it was Azure ML notebooks, and like basically that's more like Jupyter notebooks. So we are flexible enough to use that Azure notebooks in the Azure ML portal itself. And
Mm-hmm.
we also load our entire code base into Azure ML because we can use the
Mm-hmm.
GPU basically,
Yeah.
because our entire AI engine actually lies in the GPU service. So when we are
Mm-hmm.
using the code, that means it's more like Python scripts, right? So
Right.
when we are using the Python scripts, like to switch from, so what happens in like normal, the entire code base is like it is not a long notebook. It's like multiple Python
Mm-hmm.
files here and there. So we
Right.
have to get into one function, we'll jump into the next code. So
Right.
the people who are very comfortable with the local setup, that means the machine, local machine, they find it a little hard actually. That means like
Mm-hmm.
in our team we have developers as well. Okay, and for a data scientist it's good to, or like
Mm-hmm.
they like the interface of a notebook, but for a developer they will not like the
Right.
interface of a notebook. They really
Right.
want to actually have the flavor of that Python file, and they want to jump into the files, like they want to hope it basically. So
Right.
and one interesting thing in Azure ML is that we can directly load the entire script, entire folder in the Visual Studio, which is
Yeah.
very promising. And
Yeah.
earlier, I think it was in beta version. Now it's pretty stable. I could see, because I
Yeah.
also use that Visual Studio right now, and it's pretty
Yeah.
nice. Like we can exactly use how it is in the normal environment. So yeah,
Yeah.
and what we do is like we train the model. We
Uh-huh.
so the thing is like to avoid cost in deployment. What we do is actually we transport this model to blob storage.
Okay.
Okay. So, and from the blob storage, every time the solution is running, we just load the model from the blob storage. And
Okay.
the challenge is that like we will not get the auto scaling flexibility which the endpoints provide, the deployment models provide.
Mm.
So slowly we are
Right.
migrating that to the endpoints, because now we understood like so what happens is like then
Yeah.
when we are using transform models, some models, like if we are using it in a series, what happens is like it started crashing for some models. So
Mm.
now we realize like okay, it's best to replace that with the ML endpoint. And we don't even need, maybe we don't even need to run the entire system in a GPU, because model we are calling it in a CPU cluster. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like that
Yeah.
flexibility is there. Like after training
Right.
we register the model. So like yeah, like
Yeah.
I like the pipeline in the ML in that way. Like it's much more flexible. Like it's much
Yeah.
more flexible, as you said. And yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, I just want to highlight that.
Yeah, and like notebooks or Python scripts, like Azure ML will support both, right? So ultimately, it's like, what are you
Correct.
comfortable with? I do see exactly what you said is exactly what I see with customers is that data scientists are generally more comfortable with notebooks. ML engineers are generally more comfortable with Python files, and I also see that there's a little bit of a sequencing in the sense that often data scientists will use the notebooks and will do the experimentation and come up with a model that works and all that. And then they'll pass their work to the ML engineers.
Correct.
And then
Correct.
ML engineers will kind of separate it, organize it, refactor it, make all these Python files. And so generally that's what gets deployed with Azure ML, right? So that I see that sequencing, but it doesn't have to be, like, in the sense that if a data scientist wants to go straight to deploying their or even training their model in the cloud from a notebook, or deploying their model in the cloud from the notebook, we support that, right? We can do that, right? So basically, whatever you're more comfortable with, it should just work. Yeah.
Correct, correct. I like that flexibility which Azure ML offers, like because it depends, like because like there are so many mindsets, like when it comes to the implementation side, and like
Right.
Azure ML supports that. Like it's not really concise to a single thing. Like we are flexible
Mm-mm.
enough to explore the options. So that's
Exactly.
actually good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because people just
So
have different preferences, right?
correct,
So
correct,
yeah.
correct. True, true. So to the next question, like, so how does Azure ML team decide which new features to add?
Yeah. So we have many different ways. So we have the Microsoft Azure ML Insiders program. Maybe that's what you're doing. I don't know if that's what you're the program you're going through to work with a responsible AI team. So it's essentially a program that enables companies to work directly with the product team. And so what you get to do is you get to play with the features before they're released to the public. You have access to like that early code, and you get access to the team, and you get to give feedback at the time that the features are being developed, and you get to shape the product essentially. And if you want to get into that, we're actually right now in that enrollment phase for that program. I don't know how often it happens, but it's happening right now. So if you're working for a company and you have a relationship with Microsoft, you probably have a CSA assigned to your company. So if you want to get into this program, talk to your CSA, and they'll give you a form that you can fill out, and then you can apply to be in this program. So that's one way. We also have MVPs, which are our most valuable professionals. So if you're a developer and working anywhere, and you're super passionate about Azure ML, and you're blogging about it, you're speaking about it in conferences, we generally see you. We know who you are, and we often invite you to be part of this program, of the MVP program. And if you are an MVP, then you get access to the team, and you have a bunch of like events and kind of essentially a special kind of way to talk directly with the team and to give feedback, which is also very cool. So we get a lot out of it, and they get a lot out of it. So it's kind of a win-win situation. And also, like, the team is constantly on social media, on forums, on Stack Overflow, just listening to questions, to kind of seeing what are people saying, what are they getting stuck on. So we are listening. Like, sometimes it seems like you're just posting these questions, and it may seem like nobody's watching, but the people are watching. The team is watching, and they're helping. They're often like literally bring a comment from a customer on Stack Overflow to a meeting and say, we need to do this because people are getting stuck on this, and here's proof. This person is asking this question, and I don't even have an answer for them because we don't have these features. So we need to work on this. So this is something that we absolutely listen to, we look at, and so yeah. So if you have issues, go out there, talk about them, and we are listening.
Great, great. So yeah, so this question you already answered. Like, so Azure ML works well with both scripts and notebooks, and like, yeah, like that functionality is pretty awesome actually, because nowadays, like, it's not just data scientists who are working with the Azure ML, like even the ML engineers, developers, we all actually use Azure ML because that's the easiest way to even like use even if like at the least we can still use the clusters, like the GPU clusters. So like that
Exactly.
is that is a very big win actually, because the entire code whatever we are writing, like it will be in GPUs. And yeah,
Totally.
it's yeah. So, a lot of advancements are actually happening in this, and like regarding the open source packages. So, like, how well
Mm.
does Azure ML integrate all of these within?
Yeah, so Microsoft in general, and I think Azure ML in particular, we really do try to integrate with open source and to be friendly to open source and to contribute back to open source also. And I think there's I'm just going to highlight two packages that I personally love, that I use a lot, and I feel like Azure ML team is also very passionate about, which is MLflow and PyTorch. So MLflow is basically a package that helps you essentially in the entire life cycle of machine learning. And the Azure ML team has really embraced it. And just to give you some, if like a few examples of benefits of using MLflow, for example, you can use MLflow logging, like for your metrics. And if you use that logging, then if you go to our portal or to our studio web page, you see everything in nice charts and everything without writing a line of graphing code, like without having to plot your metrics or anything. And that comes for free if you use MLflow metrics. So I personally always use MLflow metrics for that, because then I can just analyze my code so much better. Another advantage is if you save your model as an MLflow model, then when you go to deploy it, you can do it with a button without having to write extra code, without having to write a scoring script or any extra code to deploy it, which saves a lot of time, right? Because it's code you don't have to write. So that's another advantage. And for PyTorch, I already talked about the Azure container for PyTorch, right? So if you are, Microsoft has embraced PyTorch, and Azure ML team has embraced PyTorch, and so if you are using PyTorch and you use this container, you're just going to be mind blown by the the speed improvements that you'll see, and so it's benefits, huge benefits for people using PyTorch. Just a couple of examples.
Right, right. In the responsible AI dashboard also, like ML flow integration is there. So
Yeah,
it is, yeah, it is happening with the ML flow.
for sure. Yeah.
So yeah, so maybe like my last question, like how, so what do you think about, what do you think are the major trends that will shape MLOps in the near future?
So much, there's just so much going on, right? I see responsible AI being a huge area of focus, not just for Microsoft, but for everybody in the field, right? Because it's a hard problem, and it's often not 100% obvious what's right. Like a lot of times, you have entire teams, entire companies putting out models that then do horrendous things that people just didn't catch it, or people didn't think it was wrong, but then other people think is wrong. So just having a really like formal way to think about it, I feel like we're in the early days of that. And Microsoft has been doing it, other companies have been doing it, and I feel like we're just taking baby steps. There's just so much more that we can be doing and that we will be doing to fix the issues. I also think that we're still in the age of large models, right? We've started seeing that a few years ago of like models getting bigger, bigger, bigger. It still seems like every week I read tech news and there's something that just blows my mind. Just somebody did an even larger model than the previous one that does this and that and that. So I still feel like we're living through history in a way in AI, right? Like I feel like there's other areas of computer science that happen, that you're living through history if you lived like 20, 30 years ago. And I certainly feel like we're living through history now in AI, just with these humongous models that come out that do just these amazing things. Um, and I also think that we're going to start seeing a bigger focus on data. I feel like we've put a lot of focus into improving our models and kind of making better models, but we've kind of forgotten the data bit. And I feel like we're getting back to that a little bit. I feel like there will be better integration between MLOps tools and data processing tools. And I think there will be a better, a stronger focus on kind of having good data, not just having good models. I
Yeah,
think that's
like
it.
so the important point which you mentioned, like regarding the data which we are training and the responsible AI. So like I also feel the importance of it because like I did a lot of podcast on that actually on this particular topic
Mm-hmm.
regarding business ethics and related to transparency in AI. So in all these podcasts and actually what you mentioned also, like uh, basically like recently this app came like Lensa AI, and like people started uploading their images and they are getting very, what to say, vulgar images in return, and they started
Yeah.
realizing
Right.
why it is happening, like and then why stable diffusion is actually giving in the backend. Stable diffusion is what's happening running,
Right.
and like why the model is trained with so and so images of like, and why it's so biased towards women, like when they give a
Yeah.
image, why it's returning all the half naked pictures of women and
Right.
fully dressed men as the images for men. So like
Yeah.
so these kind of questions are actually posing, and like people started discussing about it, like even non-tech
Right.
people started uh, asking, and like I still remember like a lot of people actually even reached out to me asking like, okay, why it's returning like this, and why it's happening like this. So the simple answer is like, yeah, like as you said, like it should be like we cannot just develop AI just as okay for the namesake, or like okay, I have the assets, I can create the model. No, that should not be the case. Like we should be training the models in a proper responsible way, wherein like it satisfies everything, and like it should be essentially not a threat to the society or the environment where we live. So yeah, these kind
Absolutely.
of things are
Yeah.
having huge importance at this moment. And like I so that's where like I really like the initiative from Microsoft on the responsibility. And even so there was a podcast with Michael Fiero, like he was talking about
Mm.
recommendation. So he also works in Microsoft actually, in the
Okay.
recommendation department. So what he
Okay.
said is like at Microsoft there is a screening time or something, like whenever a new product or some project or something is starting, like they will go through a series of questions like, okay, is it meeting the what to say responsible criteria. Like it's not like directly jump into a solution. We can build it. So
Right.
I see the importance of that process actually, because like it is extremely important. We cannot directly just throw away a solution just like that to use it for public,
Yeah.
okay, and just getting whatever stuff in return.
Right.
So
And I
yeah,
think that all of us, like AI practitioners, we want to do something that makes the world better, a better place. Otherwise, why are we doing it, right? Like, I don't want to work on something that's going to make the world a worse place, right? And I think that AI has the potential to do either. It has the potential to make the world
right,
amazing or really, really bad, right? And I feel like we're now at that inflection point where AI is getting powerful enough that we can kind of choose which way we're going to go. And I know exactly which way I want to go, right? I don't want to be working in a field that's making the world a better place, a worse place, right? So I feel like this is
right.
hugely important to address now, like right now, right? I want my work to matter, right? I want people to be happy about it and to do amazing things with it.
Great, great. Yeah, so that
Yeah.
covers all my questions for today, and thank you so much, Beats, for explaining all these important concepts in Azure ML, and like how it's evolving in the entire MLOps and the AI, and even the entire product space. Actually, like a lot of companies, a lot of projects are currently using this Azure ML, which is really great. And yeah, like I also personally like to thank the entire Azure ML team for bringing such a good amount of flexibility to the users. And like, yeah, thank you so much.
You're so right that the team is amazing. I'm sure they'll appreciate that. And thank you for inviting me and for giving me the opportunity to talk about these things and just, chat with you.